Welcome. Thank you for coming tonight. We appreciate it. I'm Wes Dawson, the president of the Rock Lake Improvement Association. As you may recall, we met back in February as a public forum, talked about what we were going to do. Tonight, we want to go through some items with you and hopefully get some input from you as the public. You may recall that in 2006, the Rock Lake Improvement Association, along with the city, the town, the Joint Rock Lake Committee, the county, developed a lake management plan. Last year, 2016, the board, the Rock Lake Improvement Board, sat down and said, you know, we've covered some of these items. We've done some of these. There were 143 priorities, I think. 43? We did a number of those, some that we still couldn't do, but it was time to update the plan. So with the help of Patricia Cicero, she prepared a grant. She and I met with the DNR in, I think, last December, November, December. Our grant was awarded in March of 2016. From there, we've set up a process that you're going to hear about tonight. We'll talk about what data we compiled, the analysis that we did, the advisory committee that we established, Patricia's work with other lake individuals, professionals. So before I close, I do want to thank Patricia Cicero with the Jefferson County Land and Water. She did a lot of the work, continues to do a lot of the work. Nathan Piles is the chairman of our Advocacy and Planning Committee. Nathan chaired that committee that developed this plan, along with an advisory group that he will also talk about. So I hope you get some dialogue with you tonight, get some input, and with that, I'll turn it over to Nathan.
Thank you, Wes, and thanks everybody for coming out tonight. It is a small group, so hopefully we can have a nice dialogue. I wanted to start by mentioning the advisory committee. As you'll hear from the vision, this is really about the community working together towards a common goal. And in order to understand what that common goal is, we really needed input from the entire community. So the folks that really helped us out, Ashley Berg, who is here tonight, he represented the fishing stakeholders, Patricia and Wes, who you've already been introduced to, Melissa Furman, she represented motorized recreation, Kevin Lehner represented non-motorized recreation, Steve Oostdijk, Town of Lake Mills, David Schrader represented agriculture, Cecilia and Susan Trier represented shoreline residents, particularly shoreline restoration. Nick Tippery represented the environment, and then Bob Volanek, who's also here tonight, represented the Joint Rock Lake Committee, and then from the city, Steve Wilkie was also on this committee. So I wanted to thank everybody for being active participants and for their contributions to help determine these recommendations. So what we'll be going over tonight in greater detail are the recommendations. You all have a copy of them. To come to these recommendations, we had a public input session last February, February 9th, and we had about approximately 30 people attend that. And it was really nice to hear everybody talk about the lake, and it was very obvious that the lake is a very meaningful part of this community and of these people's lives, and they shared that with us. So we got some ideas there that helped form these recommendations. We also conducted a public survey, which Patricia's going to share some details, that had a nice response rate. And we also got comments from the survey as well as the survey results. And then tonight is the last and final public comment section where you have a chance to shape and influence these recommendations before they are finalized. So we're going to have a board meeting in November, the RLIA board, and at that meeting we will vote to finalize these recommendations. Does anybody have any questions on the process before I turn it over to Patricia?
Thank you. Really, it was great to have Wes and Nathan be such strong leaders in this process. I think the process benefited from their involvement greatly. So, how many of you got the public survey and filled it out? Awesome, great. So I just wanted to share a little bit about the statistics, the background statistics of that public survey. We had about a 24% return rate on that survey. 82% of those people were year-round residents of the community. About 30% were lakeshore property owners. And then when you look and see exactly where these people call their permanent residence, the vast majority, 50% almost, live in the city as their permanent residents, 24% in the town, 19% are permanent residents outside of the state. And then that Wisconsin residents, 9%, is the people who their permanent residence is not in Lake Mills, but it's in Wisconsin. And it was interesting also because we had a wide age range of people who had been in the community and had been enjoying the lake for a very long time. I think the oldest was 80 years old, or 80 years that they had been in the area. We didn't ask the age, we just asked how long they enjoyed the lake. But the average was almost 27 years. And so that was really great because we have a lot of history and knowledge with those people responding to this survey. So one thing I thought was very interesting is we asked people to tell us all the activities that they enjoy on the lake. And you know, it ranged, had a big diversity of activities. But I think the top 5 are pretty interesting. The total number one response that got the number one responses was the scenic enjoyment, and then the next was peace and tranquility. That was a little bit surprising maybe to all of us, but it makes sense because we all love the lake so much and love to look out at it and like to have the peace and tranquility. Then also people really enjoy swimming and observing the wildlife. And canoeing and kayaking was definitely something, we did this similar survey more than 10 years ago to also get input at that time. And canoeing and kayaking wasn't really on the radar at that point, and you can see how much has grown in popularity. So I thought those results were interesting. So one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to start reviewing what you have in front of you, and I'm going to basically give you an overview of what our vision, goals, and recommendations are. And then after I'm done with the presentation, giving you that overview, we'll open it up to everybody to give us your ideas, your reactions about what we have. Was there anything that we missed? Was there something you think that we need to expand upon? Is there something on here that you don't agree with? We basically want to hear everything. Nothing you say is a bad idea, so we really want your input. So I'll start with the overall vision of the management plan, and it's to work in partnership with our community to protect and enhance water quality, habitat, recreational assets in Rock Lake and its watershed for the current and future generations to come. And our first goal is a water quality goal. It's to improve the water quality by reducing the amount of phosphorus in the lake by 20% in 10 years. So that's a pretty big goal. A lot of people already know that our lake is in pretty good condition. You can see some of these pie charts that you'll see all along in the presentation are right out of the public survey. So the majority of people definitely know that our water quality is really good. But when we look at the data for phosphorus, we have a trend of increasing phosphorus in the lake, and that's not a good thing. So that's why we decided we need to reduce the amount of phosphorus in the lake to make sure that that doesn't contribute to algae and excess aquatic plant growth. So in order to attack this goal of water quality goal, we have a number of areas that we're going to be doing activities in. One is in the agricultural area, where basically the recommendations under that section all have to do with installing conservation practices. Just realized I have underlined things I want to say. All right, so you can see, you know, a lot of people strongly agree or somewhat agree that farm fields can cause problems to the lake, and so there's a number of conservation practices that can be put on the land to keep the soil on the land and prevent the phosphorus from getting to the lake. And so there's a number of recommendations having to do with that. There's also residential sources of pollution. And so basically, one of the things we want to do is increase the total length of shorelines that have native vegetation on them. Those are trees, shrubs, and flowers and grasses. And we want to increase that native vegetation by 50% by the year, in 10 years. Let's see. The other thing is that we want to ensure that construction site erosion laws are enforced both in the town and the city. We don't want situations like this picture on your right, that there's a lot of erosion coming off of those construction sites and leading to pollution in our waters. We also want to promote the use of stormwater practices throughout the watershed and in the residential areas, things like rain gardens, rain barrels, native plantings. Streets are also a source of pollution to our waters. That pollution can be oils, greases, sand, salt, phosphorus, sediment. And you can also see from the survey results that people recognize this as one of the sources of pollution to our lake. So we want to reduce those pollutants from the streets. We want to encourage the city to improve their snow disposal practices. The picture on the left shows that they're piling it right by the mill pond, and it looks pretty dingy. So all those pollutants go right into the mill pond, so we want to change that. Also, we want to encourage the town of Lake Mills to in the future modernize their approach to snow and ice removal and make sure that they're putting down sand in the right places and salt in the right places. So our next bigger goal is to work on water quality sampling. And that goal is to measure the health of lakes and streams in the Rock Lake watershed with volunteers and applicable technologies to track trends and identify sources of pollutants. So you can see a number of people, many citizens, some agency folks get involved with the sampling. And I'm not going to go into any detail on those items, but they're in front of you. We also have a habitat goal, which is to achieve a diverse ecosystem in the water and on the land for native plants and animals to thrive. One area in our recommendations has to do with fish and wildlife. And so we're not only doing surveys to track the populations in our area, but also we're doing these things to look for opportunities to increase fish and wildlife habitat. Another habitat goal has to do with aquatic plants and invasive and nuisance species. So for aquatic plants, part of the management plan grant was to do an aquatic plant survey. That survey was done this summer. However, we don't have the results all tabulated yet. So one of the recommendations is to look at those surveys results and determine if there's recommendations that need to be made once we understand what's going on with the aquatic plant population. Also, we know that there's been issues with Eurasian water milfoil in certain areas of the lake, and so we want to pursue some work to see if we can do some hand pulling and control that species in those certain areas. We also have a Clean Boats, Clean Waters program that we've been doing jointly with the town and the city for the last few years. And that program hires people to have a really hard job of being at the boat launches during the summer. But they enjoy talking to the boaters and educating them about aquatic invasive species laws. So we want to continue that program and that partnership with the town and the city. Another habitat goal has to do both with the shoreline and shallow areas, and then we also touch on some things about the mill pond and the channel from the mill pond that leads out to the lake. So there was a shoreline and shallows survey done on Rock Lake in 2015 and 2016. And we want to make sure that that survey is performed every 5 years. And this survey really led into the goal in the water quality section that had to do with increasing native vegetation on the shoreline. Also, you might have heard that the city has hired a consultant to look into the feasibility of dredging the mill pond and or the channel and or the mill pond. So we're encouraging the city to hold a public comment session similar to this that would be outside of their city council meeting to receive input from the public once the results of that survey are known and once the recommendations from that consulting firm are known, because there's good habitat there, people live there, there's a lot of great fish species in the mill pond, so we think it's a good opportunity for the public to get involved and give comments. The next big area that we cover is lake recreation. And our goal for that is to ensure a safe and healthy multi-purpose recreational environment. Like you saw in the survey results, there's lots of things that people enjoy on the lake, and we want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to do what they want and it doesn't impinge on others, and so that we can all recreate happily together. So one of the things we want to do is look at recreation on the water, and in those recommendations, one of the things we want to do is recreate a survey that we had done a number of years ago looking at the number of boats and usage of the lakes and at the launches, number of trailers, and recreate that survey so that we can get a better sense of how congested the lake is compared to the last time we did this survey, because there might be some concerns with congestion on the lake, and that might lead to safety concerns. We also want to share with the Lake Patrol some of the public survey results, because there were results that showed that there was some rules that the public thinks aren't being followed. The number one rule that was stated was the slow no wake distances were not being followed, such as the distances a boat can go fast, close, next to shore, how far that distance is. And a lot of people don't think that that rule especially is being followed. So we're going to be sharing those results with the Lake Patrol and increasing their education of those issues and perhaps citations too. Another thing we want to do is research with another public input session in the future of the viability of simplifying the current slow no wake distance rules. So right now motorboats can travel, they have to travel slow no wake speeds within 100 feet or 150? 100 feet from shore? Sorry, when I'm up here I sometimes lose it. And then personal watercraft have to be 200 feet from shore. So there are some lakes that have decided that they're just going to do a blanket 200 feet for every boat. But we felt like we didn't have enough information or public input on that yet. So we're not proposing with this recommendation to do anything yet. We're proposing that more research should be done into that topic. And just generally, we think it's a good idea to educate residents regarding all the slow no wake rules out there because there seems to be a fair amount of misunderstanding of it. Another group of recommendations having to do with recreation has to do with beaches all throughout the lake and also Sandy Beach in particular. The city has switched their water quality sampling to do what's recommended by the DNR and EPA, but we want to encourage them to do the posting as the DNR and the EPA recommends. So one of those, the yellow sign is a caution sign. There could also be closures to beaches. So we want to make sure that they're doing that the way that's recommended. Also, right now what they're doing is when they have a water sample that is above the advisory or the closure level, they wait an entire week to do the resampling. So we want to encourage them to take another water quality sample and send it to the lab for analysis the day after one of those advisories or closures is found. Because it has to do with public health. We want the public to have a safe environment to recreate in, and so that's why we're encouraging that. Another thing many people probably have heard about also is that the city has hired a consultant to look at the Sandy Beach area, including the trailer park, and to figure out if there's other uses there, whether it's restaurants or a different kind of condominiums, or there's a whole bunch, meeting spaces, banquet halls, things like that. So again, that study has not yet come out, but we think this is an important thing for the public to be involved in. So we would really encourage the city to hold, again, a public comment session similar to this one to get people's input on when those results come back. All right. So then finally, our next big goal has to do with education. And that goal is to achieve a more knowledgeable and active public in regards to Rock Lake, the watershed, and also the lake management plan. So some of those have to do with providing information to the public in many different ways. All right, so those are all of the vision, goals, and recommendations that the group has come up with. And again, there's more details in the handout. But I just wanted to reiterate what our next steps are. So first of all, we'll be turning to you to get your input in just a moment. Then in November, the Rock Lake Improvement Association has a board meeting. It is the third Monday of November at 6:30. The public is always welcome at their meetings. And at that meeting, they'll be listening to a recap of your comments. We're going to be putting notes together on all of your comments to provide to the board ahead of time, which they'll review and then come to the meeting ready to discuss finalizing the vision, goals, and recommendations. The other thing that you don't see tonight is all the background that went into these recommendations. And so that's what's going to make up the management plan. So section on data, section on all the different issues, recreation, water quality, all of those things. So all the written materials will be there like we've had in the past. If people aren't familiar with the previous management plan, it looks like this. It's on the Rock Lake Improvement Association website. That's what will happen with this next plan too. It'll be there for the public. So then the DNR grant that we have, we're going to be finalizing that report in December. And then really the next step for the next 10 years is to implement this plan with all of our partners, and that means you too. So we will work together into the future for the health of Rock Lake. So I want to thank you in advance for all of your input. And what we'll do is, because this is being recorded, we would like you to speak into the microphone. So we haven't talked about whether I'm going to go around with the microphone or do the board, whatever you want. Jim is going to walk around. So, well, hold on.
Oh, sorry.
So I wonder if, just to keep it a little organized, maybe what we should do is start at the top and go through each goal and collect all the responses for what people think. All right, so I didn't know if anybody had any specific responses to the overall vision of the management plan. All right, so let's go to the water quality goal, and anything under that whole section, we would like to hear your input.
I'm Chris Frost from the Lake Mills Leader, and forgive me if I'm a bit naive about all this because I'm still pretty new to the area, but a couple of questions. First one is, what has been done so far specifically to reduce the phosphorus by 20%, and are there grant funds available that the Rock Lake Improvement Association could apply for to mitigate this problem?
So our goal from here on out is to reduce it by 20%. There have been definitely practices in the past, projects in the past that have been worked on to control pollution coming to the lake. Those range from agricultural practices to shoreline practices, and some things done on the streets too. Leaf campaign, marking the drains. You know, when we did the very first management plan back in 2006, the city was still having people rake all their leaves to the street. So now that's done differently. So there have been a lot of things done in the past, but there's definitely things that should be done in the future. And there are grants available, both to the Rock Lake Improvement Association and to agriculture through federal programs and state programs. So there's definitely money out there that we can get to do conservation practices on the land.
Would your group be the one that would pursue the grant funding?
So his question is who would be pursuing the grant funding. And it really depends on what projects are being put forward. I think it's going to be a partnership of the Rock Lake Improvement Association can apply for some grants. Some things producers go directly to the federal government or the Land and Water Conservation Department. There's a DNR grant that either Rock Lake Improvement Association or the county can get to help people install native plantings on their shoreline lots. So there's a variety of funds out there, and we will have a section in the report that highlights those.
So individual homeowners, I'm sorry, individual homeowners can then go to like the website, the Rock Lake website, and find things that they can apply for that live on the shoreline, that they can get native plants or get funding for native plants.
Well, yes, we'll have it in the management plan, and we'll be educating people and informing them about that. And in fact, in the survey that we sent out, there was one question that asked people if they would be interested in installing native vegetation on their lake lots, and they would check that box if they were interested. And we got around 35 people who said that they were interested in doing that. So there's some work that we can do there, which is great. And there's a Healthy Lakes grant through the DNR that we have one this year and next year that's going to be installing a rain garden on a shoreline lot. And then we're also installing something called fish sticks, which are basically trees that we're going to put in the water at Tyranina Park. We're going to hopefully do that this winter if we have good ice cover. And that will create habitat for fish. Sure. Any other water quality comments, questions? Do I have a quiet group tonight? Oh, Jim has some.
And I'm just trying to remember. Oh, sorry. I was just curious about if you could expand a little on the measures the city has taken, because I remember in the earlier study that was like the number one thing was the runoff from the city. So if you could, just describe what's been happening there. I know, I know there are the outfalls off the streets and that, and you did mention the leaves. Curious whether there's anything with grass clippings, because I do see a lot of grass clippings in the street in the summer.
So yes, one of the things that the city has been working on recently is modernizing their salt use in the winter. So they now have a system that they're going to be using more and more called brining. And that system actually ends up putting less salt on the pavement and controlling the ice better, because you actually put this brine solution, which is a saltwater mix, on the road before a storm is coming. So it's already on the road, so it helps the ice, preventing the ice from being formed. It's a liquid form. You have to have special equipment to spread it. And so you have to put in an investment, and they have been taking steps to do that. And they experimented last winter with it a bit. So that's one of the things that they're doing, and we're, with these recommendations, encouraging the town to do the same thing. Grass clippings, one of the things we're also recommending is that the town and the city work together on trying to have a joint compost area so that both city and town residents can take their compost too. And also, ideally moving the current location of the city compost, which ends up draining right into Rock Creek, and I'm sure that's not a good thing. That was something that we're recommending. I know that when the city does new developments, they are making sure that there's stormwater controls, so that's a help.
The idea that residents can utilize the compost from the city's site, because I've seen that done, where a city will have a giant thing of well composted, it'll go for a year or more, and so it turns out to be really nice compost that's available in the community and pretty popular.
So Jim was asking if part of the composting recommendation had to do with people being able to come and use that compost. We didn't get into all the nitty-gritty details. That's to come. The Rock Lake Improvement Association, after this plan is completed, is going to put together committees to work on a number of these issues. And there's an opportunity for citizens to join some of those committees because definitely the more help, the better, and the more input, the better. So yeah, that could definitely be something that could be looked into. So thanks. I guess I'll walk around since I'm responding.
I can get them here. If I may, I'm Paul Hermanson, Director of Public Works with the city.
Hi.
So let me just respond in a little more detail to that one. Thank you. Yeah, we've been using brine actually for about 3 years now, and we've reduced our salt usage by quite a bit. We don't have percentages, but we've reduced it by quite a bit. You know, not just because it's been a little more mild winters, but we're taking big steps to educate our drivers, use more brine, change our strategies a little bit so that we don't salt every single street. We sometimes simply salt intersections, that sort of thing, but we have to maintain a safe situation also. One thing you didn't mention that's important is we started piling our snow now away from the lake. We don't use Veterans Lane. That's kind of our third option as a place to put snow. And so we're trying to avoid that issue also. And there was one you touched on that, the grass clippings. Yeah, we're doing our best to enforce not putting grass clippings into the street. I will tell you straight up, when we call a police officer and say, hey, somebody's putting grass clippings in the street, can you come over here? They take a little while to get there, but they're getting what we're attempting to do. And then, you know, we recently did the education piece with you guys in conjunction with you guys on leaves. It's an educational process. It will take some time, but we just keep after it. And, you know, we get it. You know, we're trying to do our best to be part of this and to do what we can. So, yeah, we're taking steps.
Thanks. It's nice to finally meet you. Thanks for coming. I've talked on the phone and emailed, but other water quality comments? Any agriculture, residential streets, anything come to mind? I know I didn't go into a lot of details of the water quality sampling goal. Did anybody have any questions, comments, suggestions? How about the habitat goal? Okay. So Bob asked me to outline a little bit about the water quality sampling that is already done. In the summer, monthly, myself and a volunteer goes out to the deepest part of the lake and measure water clarity, temperature, and dissolved oxygen every 5 feet all the way down to the bottom. We also take measurements that we send to the lab of phosphorus and chlorophyll. So that graph that I showed you earlier, that's where all that data comes from. The DNR also comes out and does some water quality sampling at the deep hole. That was included in that data also. We have a number of very dedicated stream monitors too. So we have a team at the Rock Creek right before it goes into Marsh Lake. That sampling site's on County Highway A. And then we also have somebody downstream of the lake on Rock Creek. And both of those sites, and actually another one on Rock Creek near where right before it goes into the Crawfish River. Those teams measure water clarity, water temperature, dissolved oxygen, flow, and they also look at gather the insects in the water, and there's a habitat score that you give based on the species that you find. So basically, some of the sampling we want to do, we want to augment all that information, maybe add some additional streams to the sampling. Also doing more water clarity monitoring, which is a fairly simple thing that's done throughout the world for years and years and years. It's been done, and you can be trained to do it. We want to have water clarity measurements every other week on the lake. We also want to look more into the phosphorus in the lake and determine if there's internal sources of phosphorus being released. Without going into all the nitty-gritty science, basically in the bottom waters during the summer, there's no oxygen all the way at the bottom, and thus that enables phosphorus to be released into the water. And in spring and fall, that water's brought up and mixed throughout the whole lake, so it can add phosphorus to the water. So we want to get a better sense of if that internal loading of phosphorus has changed from the late 90s or the late 80s, no, late 90s when it was first measured. So those are the type of things that we're going to be doing. Does that answer your question? Can I have everybody who's a stream monitor raise their hand? Thank you, everybody. The DNR and the Land Conservation Department can't get to all these places, and so it's great that there's programs that are out there to train and support these volunteers so that they can do this work. All right, so let's go to habitat. Any comments on habitat? Yes.
Thanks, Patricia. I'm not sure if it pertains directly, but I do know that the water level of the lake is regulated because of the habitat and protecting it. And Bob was showing me that there is a measurement that shows the level, and I was wondering if there's any place that you can go to see what the level is and what the recommended is for this time. Because getting boats off lifts is really difficult at this time of year when the water level drops quickly. And second part of that is, has the dam helped regulate any of that? Because I know that was an issue before.
Right. So the water levels on Rock Lake are stipulated by the DNR. And what happens is that the water levels mimic, not exactly, but tend to mimic the natural course if we didn't have the dam. So in the spring, with spring rains, the water level starts to rise. The thing that's not the same is that in the summer, it's kept at a higher level. Normally, you would have starting to decline throughout the summer, but the dam keeps it at a higher level. And then in middle September, they start drawing down the lake in the fall, and then there's a lower winter level. The fall levels are drawn down, is it by October 30th?
9/15 to
October 1st. Okay, so by October 1st, they want the fall levels down, and then they go to the winter levels. And the reason why they want those fall levels down by a certain time, which is October 1st, is because there's amphibians, frogs and toads, turtles, that hibernate in the sediments and under the water, and they need that water above them for their hibernation. So if they hibernate and then you draw down the water, if you wait longer, then you're going to freeze those species out, and they're not going to be in the lake anymore. So that's why they have that amount. And then In the winter, it's at the lowest it can be, or the minimum that they have it at, because we want to make sure that in the spring, when the ice is melting and sometimes freezing and melting and freezing and melting, and it starts expanding, that we want to prevent erosion on the shoreline. So that's why those levels are kept lower during the winter. There's also minimum amounts of flow that's required to sustain life downstream. So basically, that's how that's all done. It's regulated by the DNR. The city must follow those regulations. Let's see. So in the previous management plan, there is a chart that explains what the water levels are. And previous to the new dam, you would have to go to the dam and look at the water level and read it off the gauge in order to see, as a citizen, where the water level is. The city does take readings. I think they're supposed to look at it every day. So now with the new dam. So the new dam, eventually, and I don't know if they've accomplished this yet, but they are going to be having an automatic level reading. So the city will be able to remotely see what the water level is. They won't have to visit the dam. There is still a gauge on the dam so that you yourself can go and look at the reading. I encourage you to bring binoculars because it's kind of hard to see the little lines. So eventually what the city plans to do is it won't be live, but I think you're going to be able to see the water levels maybe a week after you can see them. So it'll be a week lag before you can actually see the water levels, perhaps on the city website. Do you know any more about that, Paul?
You're right.
Okay.
Technical issues.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the ultimate goal.
Right.
I think the leg actually may be shorter than that.
Oh, great. Great.
And currently the levels are listed on the city website page, so you can go in and see what they have to be at different periods of the year.
Did that answer everything you wanted to know?
I guess the question is someone monitoring that, okay, Bob showed me it's at 765, and is that where it's supposed to be at, or is it higher or lower? And is the new dam helping regulate that? Because my understanding was that, it's hard. Sometimes it really looks like it's gone down like 4 feet, from September. So you're saying there's a place to look to see what the levels are at, but the question is someone monitoring if it's too low for the record?
So the city will definitely tell you that people are watching. If they don't regulate it properly, then they're in trouble with the DNR and they can get citations. And so, well, no, if it's not at any time of the year, if it's not the right level it's supposed to be. And there's definitely citizens out there who go look at it. If you have questions, is Rob Getz still so if you have questions specifically about it, I encourage everybody to call Rob Getz. He's the Parks Director, and you can ask him what the current reading is and where it's supposed to be, and he can let you know. The good thing is that the current dam is going to be much, much better at regulating the water levels than the old dam. The old dam, if you knew, had boards that somebody had to go put in and take out to regulate the water levels, and it wasn't very good. There was also times when debris would pile up in front of the dam, and that would also actually alter the water levels to where they were, they weren't supposed to be where they were because of this debris that was piling up. And so the new dam not only is going to be more it's going to be a more sophisticated system for managing the water levels, but also that debris is not going to be an issue too. Sure. Any other things about habitat? We had fish and wildlife, aquatic plants, invasive species, shoreline and shallows. And actually, I do want to show people, I don't know how well you can see this. This was the shorelines and shallows, one of the results of the survey. Those green areas show you the areas on the lake where the shoreline standards of the state are being met in terms of the vegetation that ideally should be on the shoreline areas. So that's where we got the percent of what lots are, or the length that is currently meeting the state standard, and how we got the goal to increase it into the future. So just thought you might be interested in seeing that. Okay. All right, so I think I'll move on to recreation. Do I have somebody wanting to talk about that? Oh, sure. You're allowed to speak more than once.
I said let someone else.
Okay.
Oh, yeah,
Just to
okay.
take the pressure off. The peace and tranquility was the number 2 item that people valued about the lake. And I don't see anything in there about boat noise. And it seems I've heard, and I think I've heard a discussion maybe at the Lake Association about this, but that, there's certain boats that when they're on the lake, everybody within a mile or 2 can hear them. And just, is there anything to do with enforcement that could be implemented that would, start to rein in the people that love to make more noise than everybody else can enjoy?
So we did a little trick on you, because one of the recommendations having to do with peace and tranquility is under education. So we want to educate the public about both light and noise pollution. So we're going to strive to try to continue to make it peaceful and tranquil for everybody. I know that this summer there was a very large boat on the lake that a number of people had concerns about how fast they were going, how loud it was. There is a noise ordinance. Is there somebody else who can explain this more to me than me? Yeah.
The noise ordinance, according to DNR, is 86 decibels. That boat, we're not sure what the level was. That individual has been approached by the township patrol, so I think you didn't hear much this fall. And the DNR was going to test for the disability decibel level. They had some equipment issues, and I don't know whether that ever happened. But in order to test, they have to have another boat, 2 people in that boat, and they have to follow that boat, and they can't do it at high speed. So whether it would pass at a lower speed, I don't know. But that was a complaint, and that particular boat has been addressed.
I'd like to make a comment that I agree that the rules and postings should be more prevalent. When we have guests up, we try to tell them the rules, but oftentimes we don't get all of them out. But especially people at the launches, if they could also put the fines down there, because I still don't have any idea. Like, I like to warn people when they take the wave runner out that if you get pulled over, this is how much the fine is, but I haven't, we follow the rules, so we haven't gotten a ticket, so I don't know what they are. So I think that would be a good deterrent to people who come especially when they don't live here and they don't know the lake rules. The second question would be, what is the process for evaluating the motorized recreational hours for Rock Lake? Because I know part of the survey was if you approve of those hours, and I'm actually in our household, 2 out of the 193 that water ski. So I know we've had discussions, but I was wondering what the process is for reviewing that.
I was going to bring up some of the results so that you could see. So the advisory committee did talk about times for towing activities and times for PWC activities. Let me just get the information so you can see it. And I'll try to make this bigger. Ah. Out of all the respondents to this question, 58.5% thought that the towing should stay at the same time. And you had called me earlier. So I actually looked into some of the more specifics. And it's because we know who the lakeshore owners are, I looked to see what they thought about the towing hours. And 72% of them also thought that the hours should stay at the current 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. And then we also can identify who the fishermen are, and about 67% of those who responded also like the 10 to 7 a.m. So when the advisory committee saw that, they decided not to take action and forward any recommendation having to do with that.
So this is the only forum filling out a survey because
Well, your question is whether or not this is the only forum. No, we don't set policy. Policy is set by the town of Lake Mills, so if you want to increase or change the hours, you would need to meet with the town of Lake Mills.
that was the question. Yeah. Okay. Because the survey, 25% of people responded and 30% of them, I think, were property, lake owners. So it does seem like it's not a true representation, or if it was put to a vote, you want to have more people responding than that. So the town of Lake Mills, and is there a specific committee that?
No, that would be the board.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Any other comments on recreation?
Just a quick follow-up on that. And being a fisherman, I obviously try to wait until 6 o'clock or 6:30, knowing that they're going to be off usually by a time, so I get a couple hours of fishing in after work or something, and in particular on the weekends. I think one of the disappointing parts that I see is the lake patrol, and not that you guys have any control over that, but the lake patrol tends to go off the lake by about 6 or 6:30. So those that are breaking the rule, they're not on the lake anymore. There's nobody there to say, it's 8 o'clock, can you be done now? But my real question was, is there any reason why there aren't no wake buoys on the east side of the lake? I mean, if you're trying to stay within 200 feet from shore, that whole side doesn't have any no-wake buoys. So is it a budgeting issue or anything, do you know offhand? I mean, it just seems like it's hard to regulate where you are from shore when there's nothing to go by.
Which side did you say?
The east side of the lake, because I'm on the west side, so the whole east side. So, sure.
Okay, so the buoys are actually, we need, there's a long process with the DNR on where slow no wake can go, and they have to approve that and everything. So what happened many years ago was that the sensitive areas were kind of cordoned off, and then around the launches and swimming areas were buoyed off, and that was deemed enough. If there is concern that we want to have more buoys, you can certainly bring that forward. Again, that would probably be to the town, but understand that it will be a very long process with the DNR to, study that and go, okay, yes, we really do need more buoys in other areas. I think this is part of the reason that the committee is looking at how do we simplify the rules so that everybody understands this is how far you are from shore, slow no wake, we're done, type of thing. Does that help answer your question?
Well, it does, but without a guidance, without seeing the buoys, how do you know where you're at? You can make it 200 feet, but what's telling you you're at 200 feet? Without something out there. So
I really seriously doubt that the DNR is going to allow us to put buoys all around.
yeah. I just thought
I think any lake you go to, you're not going to see buoys going around the lake.
If you do have,
One thing. I'm a skier and a tuber also, and a ski tow rope is 75 feet. Okay, so that gives you a very good, if your skier is out at the side of the boat, which you can, you can judge 100 feet pretty readily, but it is difficult. Yeah, absolutely.
I put up this slide because the image on the right shows all the slow no wake areas for the lake. Schultz Bay up here was designated because it's a sensitive area designated by the DNR. It has excellent aquatic habitat for fish and other species. Korth Bay is a sensitive area also. The Mill Pond is a sensitive area, as is the Marsh Lake. All right, any other recreation questions, comments? We talked about on the water, the beaches, Sandy Beach. All right, hearing none, shall we go to education? Any questions, comments, things people want to see? All right. Anything on people's minds that aren't covered by any of these topics that we totally missed? It would be good to know. So I will reiterate then that the Rock Lake Improvement Association board meeting is open to the public. Stay tuned for the recommendations being finalized and also that report being available. We will put it on the Rock Lake Improvement Association website. And if people have any questions going forward, they're welcome to talk to Wes or myself or Nathan. We'd be happy to get your input. I know that there were some people that weren't able to be here today, and I told them they could email me their input. I sent them the presentation and the recommendations. So if after today you think of something else, oh, I should have said that, please feel free to email any of us. My email is on the county website, but it's probably easier to get to the Rock Lake people because the email is...
wdawson1234 at, you can write me, gmail.com. The website is rocklake.org, and Stan will pull that up.
Laura, do you have a question? So rocklake.org is the website, and on there is, there's a contact us place, and you can email directly from the website, and it'll go to Stanley, and he'll forward it on to all of us.
The question on the fines, I did look for those, and I wasn't able to find them anywhere. Can you direct me there? And then, is your presentation on rocklake.org from tonight, the one that has like the survey results? And then last question would be, sorry, where could I find, or is it ever posted, what the water temperature is of Rock Lake? I know in the summer they have it written on the board as you go into Sandy Beach what the water temperature is, but this time of year it would be nice to know what it is as well.
The first question was, the fines. So I myself don't know where the fines are located. I think that's an excellent point, and I forget if we had looked into it in the past, and then it became a little complicated because it depends on a number of issues, whether it's a town or a DNR. So we can...
And they can get you what the different fines are.
I think it's something maybe we should discuss at the board meeting. Oh, great. And to consider, adding that as a recommendation.
Like I said, I think it's pretty hefty, so it could be
Yeah. And then then your other, the presentation. So I just finished it today. I can give it to Stan. I'm not back in the office until Monday. I can send it to him. I can potentially give it to you tonight, and he can put it on the website.
What we'd like to do is develop a page with this and the survey, possibly.
Okay.
And make it a little more coherent.
And Stan mentioned that the 2006 management plan is already on the website.
Yeah.
Okay,
So we can put the survey results up there too. But if in the meantime, you want to see them earlier than when they get posted, just shoot me an email or call me and I can send them to you. And
Maybe a week at least or something.
it's fine.
And-
And it was water temperature.
Water temperature, yeah. I actually don't know how Sandy Beach measures the water temperature. You don't know either? So there's nothing that we have specifically that measures it. Well, when we measure the deep hole, that's only once a month, and it sounds like you would like to know it more often than that. I can.
Or if there's any place you can go to.
Not that I know. Is there anything on Lake Link? No. No. Yeah. Yeah.
So one of the things that you do need to be careful about is when they post the temperature for Sandy Beach, because that is a shallows, sandy area, that arbitrarily is higher than the actual lake is. Yeah, so you need to be a little careful with that.
If you're interested, I can also send you the thermometers that the stream monitors use, and so that you can do it yourself. Okay. All right. Oh, okay. All right. So, any other questions? Well, thanks everybody for coming. It really means a lot to us to have your input and your engagement tonight, and we hope that you stay tuned and want to be involved in implementation as we go forward to make this resource the best we can make it. So thanks so much.